Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1988 film Cocktail. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Brock for requesting yet another review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, Cocktail is one of those films that over the years has become known as being infamously terrible. Like really bad film from the 80s, like one of the worst. A lot of people pick this as Tom Cruise's worst film of his career. And after finally watching the movie, I don't understand the amount of hate that it gets, the amount of vitriol that the movie gets. I don't think it's Tom Cruise's worst. I don't think it's one of the worst films I've seen from the 80s. I think it's an okay time waster. And I think that's honestly the bar for the movie. I don't think the film had a chance to be anything other than average, considering the film's limitations when it comes to its script and the concept. It's one of those things where, in theory, it might have sounded like a good idea, but in execution, you quickly realize that you don't have enough for a full movie. And you might as well have just decided to do something else. But the fact is, the film was a huge hit. It made a ton of money. So I guess, despite the fact that this script is totally uneven, and has moments where the tone shifts so fast that it gives you a massive case of whiplash, and it's a very generic movie in a lot of different ways. It's sold. It's sold well with audiences when it came out. And I think in large part it was just Tom Cruise. It was Tom Cruise's aura. It was his magnetism. It was the fact that this was Tom Cruise, hot off of Top Gun and Color of Money and other films in his career at that point. He was one of the hottest stars in Hollywood, and that is why this film was such a huge hit. And I think that's the only reason why this film is even remembered for the most part, is because of Tom Cruise. Maybe, Bryan Brown as well and Elisabeth Shue also do a decent job. And of course, the Beach Boys song Kokomo, which for a lot of people, that's like the most memorable thing about the movie, which I find kind of interesting because of the fact that that song is not even featured that much in the film itself. There's like a brief scene where you hear it in a transition shot during one of the scenes in Jamaica, and that's it. It's not like you hear it again. It's not like it's prominent throughout the movie. There are other songs from the soundtrack that are actually more common and were heard a lot more often in the movie than Kokomo. But Cocktail, it's a film that, to be honest, I was enjoying for like the first 30 to 40 minutes. But then it went to Jamaica, and then it turned into a generic romance, and then it became boring, and then it just really started to show its cracks after that point. I don't know if a different director really would have done a whole lot. I mean, Roger Donaldson, I thought he did a good job. It's Cocktail. I mean, you could have Scorsese behind the camera again, working with Tom Cruise, and there's really not much else that you could do, or not much you could do differently than what Roger Donaldson did with this film. There's some nice looking shots of neon and glitz and glamour. There's some fun sequences that really do capture the potency, and the right mix of energy for the bartending scenes. Um, there's some nice luscious shots of the Jamaican landscape and a lot of other aspects of the big city. And there are some moments where it's shot in a way that's a little gritty, a little seedy, which was which was a welcome sight, but that wasn't very often. And in fact, I really do feel the film might have been better if it was just a more gritty, dark film from the very beginning and stayed that way and was a cautionary tale of ambition uh, gone awry. But that's not really what the producers wanted. And I read something that the original novel that this is based on, which was also by Haywood Gould, who wrote the script for this adaptation of his work. It was more along those lines. So that would have been interesting to have seen, and I think Roger Donaldson probably would have done a good job with that cocktail. But it's just one of those things where, with what he has to work with, Roger does a good job here. The direction is not a problem. I don't think it's a film that looks bad. I don't think it's got issues in terms of the camera work. It's got enough energy to it. It's lively enough in terms of the camera techniques and the movement and different setup of shots that it's a nice looking film, and it does have a good look and feel to it, and a feel that is for the most part rather consistent when it comes to its visual style. Unlike the script by Haywood Gould, which I know it's based on his own novel, but you can tell that he's making a lot of sacrifices here. I think I read an interview where he tried to find the fine line between what he was trying to do with his novel, which was a more gritty, darker kind of story, as well as a more friendly, more amicable type of tale that would appeal to a wider audience and would just be more of a mainstream kind of movie. And he tried to find the fine line between the two, and somewhere along the line he got lost and he just wasn't able to find that line. And I think with this kind of movie, that would have been very difficult anyway. But part of me just feels he should have just picked one direction and just stuck with it, because the issues that really do hurt this film are mainly related to that, as well as the fact that it's just very generic and one note, especially with the romance. But other than the genericness of it all, it's the tonal shifts. I mean, this is the film where Tom Cruise and Bryan Brown are doing the shimmy shake and mixing drinks and flipping bottles, and Tom Cruise goes to Jamaica and falls in love with Elisabeth Shue, and they make out at a waterfall. And it's also the same movie where there's a suicide in the final act. It's like, whoa, like what? Like, I bet a lot of people, when they think of Cocktail, especially if they haven't seen it or they don't remember that bit, that is the last thing that's going to come to their mind. Like, whoa, wait, suicide? Key Largo, Montego, baby, why don't we go down to Kokomo, where people die and kill themselves? That's where I wanna go, down to Kokomo. I mean, no, absolutely not. So yeah, really, really bad choice by Haywood Gould to throw that in there. It just it didn't really add much to the movie except other than shock value, and it didn't really add as much weight as I think the writer intended it to, because they gloss over it and move past it rather quickly. That's why just pick a lane and stick with it. If you want to make it a more gritty, dark, cautionary tale of avarice and ambition, then just do that. Don't try to do both. Have your fluffy rom-com and then also have suicide. That just doesn't work. Um, and if you're gonna do the romance stuff, like, do something different. Try to be more interesting or unique, or instead of the whole, oh, I fell in love with this girl and then I messed up and we broke up and now I want her back, and oh, she's actually rich. Oh wow, I would have never thought that. And then, oh, I got to do all these things to show that I don't want money and I only want her. And then you're just like, just get together already and end the movie. Maybe that's why the suicide was thrown in there, to just knock people out of their boredom. But it was only for a brief moment. And it's too bad because Tom Cruise is trying. He's trying to carry this movie. And he almost does. He almost makes this film good because his character is likable, he's engaging, he's got a lot of personality and charm to him, and you want him to succeed, you want him to get his own fledgling bar business off the ground. You root for him in the scenes where he is in college and he calls out the professor and calls him a loser and tells it like it is, and that's a crowd pleasing moment. So is the scene where he has the balls to go to this snooty opening of a art gallery and gets in a fight with the guy who created this stupid looking sculptor because the guy treated him like shit and he's not having any of it. So he kicks his ass and breaks his sculpture. So there's a lot of things to like about Brian Flanagan and his character in this movie. Bryan Brown's Coughlin, he's fun too. Coughlin, he's got, these rules, or Coughlin's Law, and there's a lot of fun to be had with that. And I felt that Brian and Doug, they were good characters. They had a good connection with one another, really, to the point where that should have been the focus of the movie instead of the romance between Elisabeth Shue and Tom Cruise. But that's just me personally. uh yeah, the character of Jordan, they're typical romantic love interest for a multitude of different movies. Not really a lot of nuance, not really a lot of subtlety, not really a lot of interesting things about her. Uh, I felt that Doug's wife Carrie was more interesting. This rich girl who married this um raw, just rough around the edges bartender to kind of stick it to her parents and so on. But you can tell that there actually is a point where the relationship starts to lose its steam, and then she goes on and does other things. And it's one of those things where I like the contrast that the script has between the relationship between uh Coughlin and his rich wife compared to the relationship between Brian and Jordan. And I think there was I think in the original script, and I think there were some more scenes that were shot actually that had more dealing with Carrie's character. And I honestly wish they had those scenes in the film because that character was interesting to me. A lot more interesting than a lot of the other characters that were in the script. Um, but yeah, it's just one of those things where there's a lot of stuff that happens in the movie, but a lot of it doesn't necessarily carry as much weight as I think maybe the script intended it to. Uh, it's a good start. It is a good start. I do like the first like 30 to 40 minutes when you're introduced to Brian and he's hitching a ride and he gets to New York and he's got all these dreams and ambitions and he doesn't necessarily know what to do. He tries to go to all these different big companies to ask for a job from the ground up, but they turn him down despite his good looks and his charisma because he doesn't have the resume. And that leads him to working for uh Coughlin at his bar, and the two become friends. And then he's also going to college while he's working as a bartender, and he's learning the ropes of bartending, and he's slipping, sliding, and failing initially until he figures it out. And I like that part of the film, when the relationship between, I mean, not really a relationship, but I can see why some people think it's a bromance between Bryan and Doug. But when Bryan and Doug have their falling out, and Bryan goes to Jamaica, and Doug does his thing and disappears from the film for a good chunk of the movie until he comes back, the film just loses my interest when it comes to the narrative. It's just not as engaging. It's not as fun because I like the dynamic between Bryan and Doug. And then it turns into just a generic romance that does nothing for me. And then it tries to move away from that by throwing in some kinks in the narrative, with the drama involving Bryan and how he cheated on Jordan with this rich girl because he wanted to prove a point to his friend Doug that he could hustle. And that predictably blows up in his face. And then he is desperate and he tries to do everything he can to get Jordan back. You find out that she's pregnant, which that wasn't really as surprising as the writer thought it was either. And, does eventually win her over, gets her back, but still loses his best friend because he fucking kills himself. And he gets his bar. He puts the neon sign that says "Cocktails and Dreams" on the wall, which is a reference to the name that he and Doug came up with for their bar that they wanted to open up. And you know, Bryan and Jordan live happily ever after. It's just one of those things where it's very predictable, the script, and when it's not, it just doesn't fit with whatever they were trying to do. So yeah, the script is easily the worst thing about the movie. It's not really the performances, it's not really the direction, it's the script, it's a story. And a lot of critics pointed that out at the time when it came out, and I agree with them. It doesn't find the right mix. It doesn't shake things up in the right way. It's kind of a bitter cocktail. Uh but the cast, they're fine. Tom Cruise, as charismatic as ever, even when he's doing corny poems about bartending. You have a lot of fun with it because Tom is just such a good charismatic actor that he still makes it work. Uh, Bryan Brown as Doug Coughlin. This was a role that really put him on the map for a lot of people. He got this role due to FX, which I think is cool. It's nice that he got some more exposure and got maybe a little bit of a bigger payday for this. I've always been a fan of his since FX, and he's good here. Um, so good that I wanted him to be in the film more, and it was a bummer that his character died. Like, why did he have to die? Just cut out the romance. Have it focus on Bryan and Doug trying to get their bar business off the ground, and maybe have the romance on the side. You didn't have to stop everything and then essentially start a different movie in the middle of the film. But that's just me. Elisabeth Shue, she's sweet, she's charming, she's lovable. I've always been a fan of hers ever since Adventures in Babysitting and Back to the Future 2 and 3, and her performance isn't bad. I think she and Tom make a good couple, but the script lets her down. Lisa Baines as Bonnie. Uh, she was there. She was the rich girl who has this fling with Tom Cruise. Lawrence Luckinbill, he plays Richard Mooney. Um, I think it was like I think that I'm trying to remember who Mooney was in the movie. Didn't really leave a very strong impression. on me, that's for sure. Gina Gershon has an early role as Coral, this reporter or photographer who has a bit of a romantic tryst, so to speak, with Tom Cruise. Um, Kelly Lynch, she's Carrie Coughlin. Um, Liked her performance as well, enough that I wanted to see more from her. Kelly actually feels the same way because she remembers that she shot more scenes, she did more, and she's just disappointed that a lot of her work was cut out of the movie. And I feel her. I really do. I sympathize with her because I that character was one of the more interesting characters in the movie and should have had more screen time. The cinematography by Dean Semler, it's nothing spectacular or special, but it's serviceable. It gets the job done. So does the editing by Neil Travis. The score by J. Peter Robinson. Not one of my favorites of his, but it's all right. It fits the vibe. It fits the feel that they're trying to go for with the movie. Uh, the soundtrack. For the most part, I think it's got some nice tracks. I know that the big hit song was Kokomo, but I personally like the opening credits song the most, Wild Again by Starship. Um, Also didn't mind, the hippie shake, the hippie shake by the Georgia Satellites, or All Shook Up by Ry Cooder, um, or Powerful Stuff by the Fabulous Thunderbirds, or Don't Worry, Be Happy, or Addicted to Love by Robert Palmer, or Shelter of Your Love by Jimmy Cliff. Um, but yeah, it's one of those movies where, yeah, I mean, I agree with Tom Cruise. He says it. He said it best. He's like, it's not a crowning jewel in my career. It isn't. It isn't. But you know, it's it's relatively entertaining. Like, it's one of those movies where it's breezy. You can have some fun with it if you turn your brain off. But even then, there's moments where things are just so jarringly out of place that it just kind of takes you out of it, and it's not paced the best despite a strong start. But it's just one of those films where, yeah, it's there for me. It's okay. It's a film I could put on the TV while I'm doing something else easily, just for the vibe, just for the music, the soundtrack. Um, but it's not one of my favorites, and it's definitely not a film that I really have a desire to sit down and watch again anytime soon. But it's not a film that I hate, or I feel is bad enough, despite its issues, to really rant on it a lot. So it's just one of those things where it's just there. It's in the middle. It's not the best mixed drink. I've had better, but I've also had a hell of a lot worse. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Cocktail, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.